Imagine a giant pile of IOUs worth trillions of dollars. That's what US Treasury bonds basically are, IOUs issued by the American government. Now, imagine China, holding a huge chunk of these IOUs, suddenly decides to sell them all off. That's a scenario that keeps some economists up at night. Why? Because if China dumps its US debt, the value of those bonds could plummet. This could send shockwaves through the global economy. Think stock market crashes, rising interest rates, and maybe even a recession. It would be a very bad day on Wall Street, and Main Street wouldn't be too happy either. It's a bit like if your friend borrowed a ton of money from you then suddenly started selling off all their stuff for cheap. You might get a little nervous, right? That's kind of what's happening with China and these US Treasury bonds. So, why does China even own so much of America's debt in the first place? And why are we letting them? Well, it's complicated, but it all has to do with trade, tariffs, and a whole lot of money printing. You know those little extra fees you sometimes have to pay when you buy stuff from another country? Those are called tariffs. And lately the US and China have been slapping tariffs on each other's goods like it's a game of economic ping pong. Why all the tariff trouble? Well, some say it's because China hasn't been playing fair in the global marketplace. They accuse China of things like stealing intellectual property, manipulating its currency, and giving unfair advantages to its own companies. So the US imposed tariffs on Chinese goods to try and pressure them into changing their ways. It's a bit like saying, you want to play dirty? Fine, we'll play dirty too. The problem is these tariffs often end up hurting everyday Americans. Think about it, when you put a tariff on something it makes it more expensive to buy. So, those cheap Chinese-made goods you used to love, they just got a whole lot pricier. You know how you can't just print your own money at home? Well, you technically can, but it won't end well. Well, the US government actually can print money, and they do it a lot. In fact, after the 2008 financial crisis and again during the COVID-19 pandemic, the US government printed trillions of dollars and pumped them into the economy. The idea was to prevent a complete economic meltdown. Think of it like giving CPR to a dying patient. Sometimes you have to do drastic things to keep the heart pumping, but printing too much money can have some nasty side effects, like inflation. Remember when that $5 footlong at Subway suddenly became a $7 footlong? Yeah, that's inflation in action. Section 4, the Federal Reserve, America's money printers. So, who exactly is in charge of this whole money printing operation? Meet the Federal Reserve, also known as the Fed. They're like the central bank of the United States, and they have a lot of power over the economy. The Fed doesn't actually print physical dollar bills. That's the job of the Treasury Department. But they do control how much money is in circulation, mainly by buying and selling US Treasury bonds. Remember those IOUs we talked about earlier? Well, when the Fed buys them, it puts more money into the economy. When it sells them, it takes money out. It's a delicate balancing act, and if they get it wrong, it can have big consequences. Section 5, the Cantillon effect. Who gets the first bite of the apple? Now here's where things get really interesting. When the government prints a bunch of new money, it doesn't magically appear in everyone's pockets equally. No sir. The new money enters the economy at a specific point, and it takes time to trickle down to everyone else. This is what economists call the Cantillon effect. The folks who get their hands on the new money first, like big banks and corporations, they get to spend it before prices go up. But by the time the new money reaches regular people, inflation has already set in, and their purchasing power has decreased. Imagine you're at the front of the line for a buffet, and you get first dibs on all the good food. By the time the people at the back of the line get there, all that's left are scraps. That's kind of what the Cantillon effect is like.